Hello key shooters! In the second part of the KeyShot RealCloth adventure, we're going to take a look at a different type of workflow to make even more convincing looking soft bodies. More precisely, we're going to make some soft body goodies to go with this chair design I have here. In order to do that, we're going to have to move over to some third-party application. I know that for many, including me, it's not exactly preferable, but it is unfortunately necessary to reach that proper fluffy or organic looking shape that comes with soft bodies. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I come from a CAD background, and I strongly believe that the workflow I'm about to present is one of the less painful ways of upping your soft body game. Now the frame for this chair is modeled up using basic and some advanced but still traditional CAD tools. And a cushion core, as we see here, is modeled using subdivision modeling. All of the geometry is NURBS, however, and we need to bring it into a software that only accepts OBJ or FBX format. Now for many it stops here, including me for a while, but let's start by looking into how we can translate our solid or our geometry easily into one of those formats. Now if you're lucky enough to work in the latest release of NX, you're already able to export your model as an OBJ directly. But since I know that many of you aren't that fortunate, I'm going to use a software called Moment of Inspiration 3D, also known as Moi 3D or Moi if you're French, which is an app I've used for a while now to simply translate step files into OBJ. So if you don't already have Moi 3D, you can find it at moi3d.com and download a free 30-day trial to test it out. So I've exported the chair design here into two step files. One of them simply is just the cushion, while the other one is the frame. And I'm going to bring up Moi 3D here and import the cushion in first by dragging it into the environment. And I'm simply going to save it as an OBJ. Now the resolution is not very important here, as we're only going to use this OBJ as a position and placeholder to model our soft bodies. Then I'll repeat the process with the frame design. And I now have two geometries to bring into our soft body modeler of choice, Marvelous Designer. And if you don't have Marvelous Designer either, you can visit their website for yet another free 30-day trial. So here we are in Marvelous Designer. As with any new software, it might seem a little intimidating at first, but we're just going to run through this process quick and dirty to get some nice looking soft bodies. We'll start by importing the OBJ we just exported from Moment of Inspiration. And let's start with the cushion. During import, make sure you're on the same unit as you used to model, and also to uncheck Align Bottom to Ground. Since we are bringing all of this together in KeyShot, it is important that all geometries remains in the same position for import. Then we repeat for the frame. Now the geometry might look a little bugged at this time, but it shouldn't matter too much as we're just looking to use them as simulation avatars. So the way Marvelous work might seem a little backwards for some, especially if you're a polygon modeler. The common modeling technique, as I've understood it, is that you model up your design first and then proceed to unwrap it in order to get your textures right. In Marvelous, however, you model up the flat pattern first on the right side in order to simulate their behavior on our left side. So let's just start with a really simple example and try to hang a blanket over the backrest of the chair. In our right side, we have a silhouette of our chair, which gives us a certain indication of the sizes we are dealing with. So I'm going to select my rectangle tool and simply draw a rectangle. Immediately after drawing this, it pops up in our simulation window to the left. So let's position this in a start position to drape it over the backrest. Now if you press the spacebar, it will start the simulation as it does here. Now if you're unhappy with the first attempt, simply click Ctrl Z to undo. Now I'm experiencing some bugs here, so I'll first select my avatar and set our skin offset to 0 millimeters. Apparently this is a known bug for custom OBJ, so it's recommended to always set this parameter to 0 millimeter when using your own OBJs. Now it's slightly better, but I'll change the particle distance from 20 to 10 millimeter. Basically, what this does is that it increases the resolution of our blanket model, so we'll get more accurate results. The downside is that the simulation gets heavier, so be careful not to go too small on this value. Now I feel kind of happy with my blanket, so I'll press the spacebar again to stop the simulation. Now in the top left corner here in your simulation window, you can see different ways of looking at the geometry. So let's look at how it's built right now. And it seems to be that we're having a little bit of a mess of polygons, and that is by default since it's relatively lightweight to simulate. However, whenever I feel happy with my simulation, I like to right-click it and select Remeshing Beta. Now the beauty of this guy is that we get a perfectly distributed square mesh all with 1x1 sizes, and this is perfect to use for the RealCloth texturing. So let's add a little thickness to our blanket before moving on. Now by right-clicking the blanket again, we can choose to freeze the simulation or the model, since I don't want it to take part in simulating the model for the cushion. I also want to disable the frame at this moment and hide it, since I just want the cushion core in my simulation window. So now it's time to model up the flat pattern for the cushion. So I'll just speed that up so you don't have to be part of every second on that process. So I want an identical top and bottom flat pattern for the cushion, and I can create link patterns by right-clicking a pattern and select symmetric pattern. These two guys will now always remain symmetrical unless I decide to remove that definition. So now, whenever I change anything in the flat pattern, the same change occurs with both the symmetrical pattern and in our simulation window. Next, I'll soften up the corners of our flat patterns by using the tool Smooth Curve. Simply click, hold, and drag on an angled corner to create a smooth corner. To duplicate a pattern without linking them, simply use Ctrl C to copy and Ctrl V to paste. So now it's time to do some sewing to define how the pieces should fit together. I'm using the tool Free Sewing initially to have a custom length sewing. We can do this either in our flat pattern window or directly in the simulation. I usually prefer to do it directly in the simulation window such that I have better understanding where the sewing is defined. Simply click once to indicate the start of the sewing and then double click at the location where you're happy. For longer sewing lines, single click along the route to make sure it sticks to your desired route. Then double click at the end destination. As soon as you have defined 2 lines, a bridge will appear that indicates where the flat patterns will be sewn. You might experience that the bridge indicates that it's crossed or in the wrong direction. So to counteract that, select the Edit Sewing tool, right-click the sewing definition and select Reverse Sewing. Now we have our definition set, so let's just press the spacebar to simulate. So the first test simulation tells me that I forgot to disable the skin offset for our OBJ file. Also, the sizes are a bit off, so I'll also adjust that. Next I noticed is that there's something bugging on the top side of my cushion, and that would be the frozen blanket that's still part of the simulation. So I'll bring that forth by right-clicking into empty space and click Show All 3D Patterns. Then I'll just move this out of the way for the time being. You can also do simultaneously size adjustment by selecting multiple patterns and adjusting the frame of it. And this can also be done real time, so when you do the changes and keeping the simulation on, the changes will appear in the simulation environment. Now I'll add a simulated thickness and a render thickness to the flat patterns. The render thickness is the thickness of the actual geometry when you export it. Again, you can preview the rendering thickness by changing the shading technique in the top left corner. So now I'll just select all the flat patterns and reduce the particle distance, which also means increasing the resolution of our flat patterns. And now we have ourselves a nice looking start. Now let's add a small little detail to the top face here by adding a little bit of pressure. What pressure does is that it adds a little bit of inflation to the selected geometry, so now it kind of looks a little bit more fluffy and comfortable. Next up, I want to add a little bit more visible seams to the cushion. I do that by selecting our Edit Sewing tool and select all of our sewing lines in the flat pattern window. So to get a little bit more visible sewing lines, you can play around with the fold strength and angle to the right side here. An angle of 180 degrees means that it tries to force a tangent continuity between the patterns. But I'm going to try to increase that to 360 degrees to create these typical indents you see with sewn geometry. After that, it's a matter of dialing in the strength to get the look that you want. I think it might be a little bit too thick fabric for now, so I'll reduce that to 3 millimeters. So let's wrap up our cushion by doing a remesh to make sure we have those nice looking quads for our RealCloth. And I also want to reduce the particle distance to make sure we get as smooth a simulation as possible during the simulation. So I'm just going to enable the simulation and let it run for a little while to make sure it kind of puts itself in the position. So I'm happy with my cushion now, so let's just freeze it and bring back our chair OBJ avatar into the game again and run a fresh simulation of our blanket to make sure it fits together with our updated cushion shape. Now at this point there are several things we could do to further increase the quality of our soft bodies, like changing fabric settings, do a little bit of sculpting to smooth out some kinks here and there. But for now I just wanted to show you guys a quick route from CAD to soft bodies. So I'm considering myself happy with the current look. That means we'll export our soft bodies and bring all of our guys together in KeyShot. So let's just select all of our soft bodies, click File, Export and OBJ. The biggest challenge at this point to me is the changes of coordinate systems from one software to another. Now I'm not fully aware of how the coordinate system is defined in Marvelous Designer, but so far I've found that the least painful way for me to deal with it is to revert the x-axis for export. Also make sure to have multiple objects selected to have KeyShot treat the patterns as individual pieces. And finally, enable thick export to export the patterns, including the thickness you defined as render thickness. So let's open up a KeyShot scene and start importing our models. We'll start with my native NX file and import that first. Remember to enable keep position relative to native origin to make sure all snaps in the right places. In NX, the Z-axis is typically the default up orientation, so I'll also define that as my import settings for KeyShot. I'll repeat it for the soft body with the same settings. Now, most of you will notice that the position isn't dead on as you import, and that's always a puzzle to figure out why that is. But as long as you kept the same units in all the modeling and the position is roughly the same, it's just a matter of rotating the soft body to make it snap into its right place. In this example, all I have to do is rotate the soft body 180 degrees about the y-axis. So now we're ready to dive into rendering. So if you're interested in taking a deeper dive into RealCloth, fuzz, and other exciting new KeyShot features, me and Esben will show you in an extensive What's New in KeyShot 9 course that will be uploaded to Gumroad in the near future. To receive an early bird discount, please make sure to subscribe to the forum below.